Hi, my name is Gene Jordan. I'm giving a brief video on a closer look at math compression. This matches a workshop that I gave in December and January of this year for helping teachers look at the lessons they have in the year and making their calendar work. Today I'll highlight a few key models, identify possible compressible lessons, and confirm compressibility of lessons using actual lesson plans. As we know, we have our most of our modules this year. This year we're still short a few, and but we'll work with what we got, and hopefully you can compress a few lessons with the future modules you are working with. Most people are looking at the state test right now in January, how they'll fit the lessons in that are required. And unless you're in third grade, you have all the modules you need to get to the state test. Last compression video, you might have seen an overview of models. I'll just briefly go over. You want to look at the cohesion of the models from grade to grade, how they're used, how they fit together with each grade, what the main learning of each year is. First grade, putting together and taking apart numbers. Second grade, that bonding, the ability to build numbers up using place value. Third grade, arrays, multiplication, division. The really take off there, as well as the introduction to the number lines, and you'll see that those models built on those younger grades feed into the big four for the 4th and 5th grade, who share many of the same models, all of which provide a foundation for the middle school grade levels in their work with ratios and proportions and then eventually linear algebra. If you want more information on any of these videos, if you have this PowerPoint, the link's there. If not, they're right on Engage New York. There's explanatory videos that I won't reproduce. I think those do a fine job of illustrating the use of those models. During the workshop, we talked about the protocols for compression to read, review, and apply, with a main summary of it, which means you read through the module overview, review the module topics, and then apply the compressed lessons. Let's go into more detail now, and with anything, we're going to follow these 3 steps when we actually get into the finding lessons to compress. So we'll highlight key models, identify possible lessons in the overview, and then confirm that the lessons actually are compressible when we look at the lesson plans. So the first thing is, let's look at what the authors are saying about these modules that they wrote. The author groups have provided us with an overview, and again, I think it's helpful because it will give them in their own words what they think was most important and why they chose certain modeling and procedural choices. For example, they'll highlight and illustrate the exact models they use, the procedures and the thinking that you'd like the kids to have for doing those procedures, and of course the terminology that will be introduced in this module. But to actually identify the possible lessons, once we have that overview and a good perspective of what is the most important topics, I suggest going to the overview of module topics and lesson objectives. And there you'll find the topics listed as well as the lessons objectives. And it's important to remember during this entire compressing that I'm using the word compressing and not eliminating or cutting. We don't want to, and what I mean by that is we don't want to eliminate these objectives here. The objectives should be preserved. We need to teach these kids these standards, and that usually is reflected by the objectives. Unfortunately, we have so many lessons. It's too many than we have days to teach, as well as the fact that some of these lessons take more than one day, certainly in the beginning. If you're interested, though, we look more closely at these lessons. I like to have a copy that I can write on, and when we look more closely at them, we can see that we have some that might be more conducive to compressing than others. For example, when you look at topic A, it's tempting to look at a lesson that says 1 and 2 and say that would be a reasonable thing to compress to 1 day because it's 2 days, same objective. They're doing 2 days for a reason, perhaps, and when you look closer at it, it might be something where we don't want to actually compress. But I would offer the lesson 3, when we decompose non-unit fractions and represent them as a whole number is a whole number times a unit fraction using the tape diagram. That matches a lot of what we're doing here. So I would offer that this could be compressed possibly into 2 days, these 3 days of instruction, by incorporating some of the lessons or part of lesson 3 into lesson 1 and 2. The other things we want to look at are possibly looking at these last 3 lessons: decompose fractions into sums of smaller unit fractions using tape diagrams, unit fractions to show using area models, using area models to show equivalence. And because these are very similar, and it's important to look at the difference, but we're going to look at these and see if we can have any compression here. And again, these are all just notations that we're looking at to help guide us in the future with possible lessons. We're not actually compressing now, but we are offering ourselves lessons to look at in the future. Let's take a look at lesson or topic D. The first 2 or 3 lessons, let's look closely at. Use visual models to add and subtract fractions. Use visual models to add and subtract 2 fractions with same units. So again, same units, but now we're subtracting from one whole in lesson 17. Lesson 18, add and subtract more than 2 fractions. So what we're doing here is we're learning how to add and subtract fractions, and it progresses to doing more than 1 fraction and adding the whole number concept. I would offer that you can look at using these 3 lessons. If we add, and this is just an idea, but if we look at subtracting 2 fractions with the same unit, and right during lesson 16 we add and incorporate a few problems from lesson 18, which is adding more than 2 fractions, you could have those concepts and ideas and meet the objective of lesson 18 doing the bulk of lesson 16 and 17 materials. So I'd offer to look at compressing that as a 2-day lesson. The last 3 lessons, 19, 20, and 21, those are interesting. I'm not going to touch either one of those for a very particular reason, especially in lesson 19, and I would note that with a star. I would say number 19, because it's solving word problems using addition and subtraction fractions, that would be a very difficult thing to compress because of the difficulty of the word problems usually found in the modules. I would give them the whole day to process, write, do the RDW process carefully with them in that day, and allow them time to show off what they've learned about the topics they learned in the previous lessons. So for that reason, I would probably preserve. It's not a good idea to start compressing a word problem. I think it's a dangerous, or it's just a more difficult thing to do. But every teacher, after especially this rough transition year, will decide in the future what lessons have worked well alone and which ones not. After we identify a few lessons on that overview, I think you need to come back right to the lesson plan itself. We talked about lesson 18 to probably pull apart and maybe add to lesson 16 and 17. This was that topic D with adding and subtracting fractions. We're looking at this is lesson 18, and looking at how they solved taking away from 1 and adding subtracting more than 1 fraction. And I would go right to the problem set and identify problems from the examples and problem set that you feel like you could get to. When you're looking at this, you're looking at the level of difficulty of the numbers as well as the topic and procedures, and see if it's reasonable to build that into your lesson 16 and 17 lessons. Could you add a couple of those problem set problems to your lesson? Another thing to look at is the end in mind. The exit ticket, we have this problem. Was to be reasonable for my students at the end of day 16 to be able to do this? If they're already comfortable with adding numbers with the same unit, can they add those numbers now that they're 3 numbers instead of just 2? Really is a teacher decision, which is why I think it's best for teacher teams and teachers to be making these decisions, because the compressing is tricky, but sometimes you can find ideas, and I'm hopefully giving you some about how you would compress those lessons. Once you find those, I think it's reasonable to have a friendly critique from a neighbor or partner or a team. You should present the calendar and justify your decisions, ask questions. Do the changes preserve the learning? If not, you should go back and review the process find more lessons, look at more detailed analysis of the lessons you did find to find a way to compress them perhaps more effectively. Ask yourselves, during the process of compression, you'll probably find yourself learning a lot more about the lessons themselves and the cohesion within them and why some are compressed and why are not. You need to figure out where your status is in the year and what are the next steps coming into the state test or end of year to find out how many more days you need to save. Thanks for watching the compression video. There's my website. I have some things up there if you are interested in including links to a lot of the Engage in New York materials I mentioned. If you have any feedback you'd like to give me or more information, just email me. Thanks again. Have a good day, and thanks for watching the compression digging deeper video.